All right, we got our form validation. We're converting our image to a CK asset. Now it's finally time to create our profile record and send it up to CloudKit. The goal by the end of this video is to be able to open up our CloudKit dashboard and see the profile that we created up in CloudKit. Over the next two videos, we're gonna lay out the process step by step. We're not gonna worry about refactoring. To be honest, code's gonna be a bit of a mess, but I'm doing that to really spell out what we're doing so you can understand all of the steps required. And then once we have successfully saved a profile and retrieved a profile to populate our profile view once it already exists, then we're gonna take a step back and refactor this profile screen, which by that time will be starting to get out of hand. So we'll go back and clean it up then. So just a fair warning, over the next two videos, it's gonna be a bit of a mess. Okay, so let's talk big picture, what we need to do to save this profile record. So in our create profile function here, right? Okay, the first thing we're doing is making sure we have a valid form. Good. Once we do, we're going to want to, we'll start commenting these steps here, right? We're gonna wanna actually create our CK record from the profile view, right? We take the first name, last name, company name, we create our CK record. Cool, now we have our record. Now, if you remember in our schema, there's two things going on here. One, we're creating our DDG profile. Okay, one, that's pretty obvious. The thing you might have forgot about is on our user record, remember we have a reference that points to the profile we created, right? That's how we connect the two. And again, the reason we have to do this extra step is because the default CloudKit user record isn't queryable, and we're gonna have to query it in order to show, who's checked into what location. So I wanna be very clear, and I'm reiterating this, if you're building an app where your users aren't queryable, you don't have to go through this extra step of creating, a DDG profile and then connecting them via a reference. You can actually put all these properties on the user itself, and that will work just fine. But again, if you want your user to be queryable, you got to take this little extra step. Okay, so that means we're actually saving two records in this process. We're saving our DDG profile that we created, and we're saving our user record that now has the reference to that DDG profile. Okay, so the next step after we create our record is to actually get our user record. And that is actually a two-step process, which kind of sucks, but there's no way around it. So the first step there is to get our user record ID from the container. And then once we have that user record ID, now we will get our user record from the public database, okay? So we need to get the user record ID in order to get the record. Now, once we have the record, we will create a reference to our DDG profile record. So that'll be the next step. Create reference on user record to the DDG profile we created. Again, that's how we connect them. So once we have our user record, our DDG profile, now we need to save them. This is where we're going to use CK operation, because CK operation does batch saves. If we use the Convenience API, the Convenience API does have just a simple save record. However, that only does one at a time. So we don't want to call that twice because that's like two network calls. We can batch save, but again, in order to batch save, we got to drop down to CK operation, which again is more powerful than the Convenience API. So we will create a CK operation to save our user and profile records. That's what's going to happen. Okay, so big picture, step by step, create our CK record from all the profile information, right? The avatar, the first name. Then we're going to have to get our user record. But first, we got to get our user record ID and then go get the user record. Now that we have the user record, let's create our reference on the user record that points to the DDG profile. And then once we have our DDG profile and our user record, we'll batch save them to CloudKit. And at the end of the video, we should be able to go to our CloudKit dashboard and see the profile that we created. Okay, up to step one, create our CK record. So we'll say let profile record equal CK record. And you might remember this. Okay, it looks like I don't have CloudKit. Anytime you don't get autocomplete, yeah, there you go. It's probably because you don't have the import. It's always a dead giveaway. Okay, so now that we have CloudKit imported, let's go ahead and get this initializer again. CK record, there we go. And just like before, it takes a record type. Remember, we did this with our mock data, but instead of passing in the string of DDG profile, remember we created some constants for this. It was record type dot profile. Remember, we did that for location. Okay, cool. So now we want to set all the properties on our profile record to what was entered on our profile screen. So that would be profile record, and then here we're going to use our constants, DDG profile.k first name. We'll say that is going to equal our first name. And first name, if you remember, is our state variable up here that gets updated as the user types. And we know we have it because we're only doing all this stuff if we passed our check. And remember, our check is requiring all fields to be required. Again, that's why I said it was simple validation, because if you make some fields required, some not required, now you got to do a lot of extra checks. Don't get me wrong. If your product calls for that, you got to do it. But like I said, for the sake of keeping this course not insanely long, we kept it simple. So we know we have everything. That's why we can go ahead and fill this in after we pass this check. So I'm going to copy and paste because it's a lot of similarity. So we'll do, instead of first name, let's do last name. Instead of first name, it is last name. And then paste again down here. And then here is K company name. And then that is, of course, company name. Paste again. Here is bio. And of course, that is bio. And then last but not least is the avatar. And then that is not equal to just avatar, because remember, well, Xcode's going to yell at me and tell me, but we're actually going to get rid of this preview. We don't need this. I need the room. You're going to see avatar is a UI image, right? Up here, avatar is a UI image. So that's why we wrote the whole convert to CK asset extension. So on our avatar, we want to do .convert to CK asset. So here we go. We have our record created. Cool. You'll see us use that in a second, but that is step one. So now the next step is to get our user record from the container. So that is ckcontainer.default. And of course, in a future video, we're going to refactor this out to the CloudKit manager. But we want to fetch user record ID. There we go. And you can see it gives me back a record ID and an error. Hit return. You can name them. We'll say record ID. And then let's call this error. And then for now, again, we're just trying to get this working. Back to my process, right? I do everything in this one view. I go straight down the happy path. By the way, the happy path, if you're not familiar with that, is how does your app behave when it's working how it's supposed to work, right? When we have great Wi-Fi. The user's not doing anything crazy, right? That's the happy path. How is your app supposed to work? Before you go in and handle all the crazy edge cases. So when I'm building something for the first time and trying to get it to work, again, straight down the happy path. I don't worry about handling errors. Let me get that working, and then we'll come back and handle all the edge cases and stuff. So again, for the context, for the next two videos, we're going pretty much straight down the happy path to make sure we have it working. Okay, and I noticed during that rant, I misspelled record. So I do put in the structure in place. So guard let record ID equal record ID. I just don't actually create the alerts and do all that stuff. And then error equals nil, else we'll print error dot local. And again, I'm forcing wrapping. I don't care at this point. We're just trying to get things to work. And I know the error is not going to be nil because we checked for it right there. But really, I just wanted to get record ID unwrapped is the whole reason I really did that. And of course, I need a return. Okay, so now that I know I have my record ID, we're going to use that record ID. So let me actually move these commas up here, or comments, not commas, because you're going to see we're going to get into some nested craziness. Again, we'll refactor. This is just to get it working. So now that we have our record ID, right? I fetched record ID, we got it back. Now I want to use that record ID to get my user record from the public database. So here we'll do ckcontainer.default.public cloud database.fetch. And we'll do fetch with record ID. Now that we have our record ID, cool. So we want to pass in record ID. Again, that's why I unwrapped it up here. In the completion handler, very similar to before, we get a CK record and an error. So hit return, and we'll say, we'll call this user record just to be specific, because we are dealing with our profile record as well. So user record, and then the error, just error. And then the same thing. In fact, I'm going to copy and paste that guard statement down here because it is guardlet user record equal user record, error nil. Again, print the error if we need to. Like I said, we'll come back and handle that properly at a later time. But now I have my user record. So here again in the next step, which again we'll cut and paste one more time because now we're up here in this network call. Again, nested craziness. I warned you. I told you the code was going to be a mess. But again, we're just trying to get it working. So now that I have my user record, I want to create the reference on the user record that points to the DDG profile. So we'll do user record. And again, it's the dictionary, right? We want to access the value at user profile. And if I pull up the CloudKit dashboard, if you remember, right, we added this user profile property onto our user record, which is a reference. So you're gonna do CK record. There is no CK like reference. You got to do CK record dot reference. That confused me a little bit in the beginning because I tried to initialize just CK reference. So when you initialize that, you see you get a record, or you can use record ID. I like to use record ID, it's simpler. So what we're creating right now is a pointer to a specific record ID. Well, we have our profile record, right? That's what we created up here, right? We have this profile record. Well, the profile record by default has a record ID. We don't have to set that. That happens when you create it. So profile record dot record ID. Now, this action here, you can see we'll do dot. You can do delete self or none. We're going to do none. So what delete self would do is that if whatever was referencing this got deleted, then it would delete this. A great example that explains this is if you were building a to-do list. Like say I had a shopping to-do list and I had items in my to-do list. Well, if I have action delete self, what this means is if the parent, right, if my overall to-do list got deleted, it's also going to delete all the items I created on the to-do list, right? That's what delete self means. If your parent gets deleted, delete yourself as well. So for this one, we actually do want to do delete self, right? If somebody deletes the user record, yeah, of course, delete the profile that's associated with that. We're not always going to do that. Because, for example, our user profile is going to have a reference to a location. If someone deletes their user profile, we don't want to delete the location, so that's a case where we're going to use none. However, because our user record and user profile are very directly correlated, that is okay to use delete self. And again, the easy way to remember that is the to-do list example. If you have a shopping list, you delete the overall shopping list, all the items underneath it will be deleted as well. Okay, so we have adjusted our user record. We have actually created a value now for the property of user profile. It is a reference that points to the profile record. We're good there. Now it's time to do some work, right? Let's create the CK operation to batch save these records. So we'll do let operation equal CK modify records operation, right? Because there's multiple different CK operations you can do, but we're going to do CK modify records operation. And you can see we initialize that with records to save, record IDs to delete. Well, we're not going to be deleting anything, right? So you can see we take an array of records to save. Well, we want to save our profile record and our user record that we have. So here, let's create the array. We'll say user record and then profile record, right? We had those from up here. Now, records to delete, we can actually delete this parameter because it will default to nil, and we are not deleting anything. But you can see if you were saving and deleting and you had a batch, this is how you batch save those. Okay, so that is our basic operation. Like I said, we're down in CK operation now, so we get a lot of customization and power. It's not the convenience API, which does a lot of the closures and all that stuff for us. We got to do that ourselves. So we will do operation dot modify records completion block, right? And I'm going to actually option click and pull this up so you can see, because it doesn't autofill it for you. And actually, this is probably, okay, that's a horrible view because it's all horizontal in one line. Let me go back to this. I understand it will be kind of small, but you can see it. So our modify records completion block, the completion handler has, you see an array of CK records, an array of CK record IDs. And if you look into it, like the first parameter is the records that CloudKit saves. And the second parameter is all the IDs of the that was deleted. Well, remember, we're not deleting anything, but this is where I got what I'm about to type out next. So you'll see here, hold on, equals. And then I need three parameters, right? I need the saved records, which was the array of records that were saved. And then here would be deleted record IDs. I don't care if there's any misspellings because I don't want a parameter name there, right? If you don't want a parameter name, you just put the underscore and then error. Hit return. Oh, I forgot the in. Forgot that for the closure. So again, this operation completion block is just like any other completion block, like just up here, how we got back a user record and an error. Well, now we get back saved records, deleted record IDs, and an error. And again, that doesn't autocomplete for you. So if you option click on this, this really spelled out what it was. If you're wondering like, how'd you know that? And again, for the sake of time, let's copy this guard let statement because it is the same here, right? We want to make sure we have not user record, we have saved records, right? And this is an array, that's why it's plural, saved records, and then we want to make sure error is nil. We're not really worried about the deleted items. We're not even going to check for that. So basically this means, hey, do I have saved records? And if we do, let's go ahead and print that so we can verify that we have that. So in our printout, once we run this, we should see some records printed out. And then the last thing we need to do on this operation here, make sure we're in the right, brackets, is to add this operation to our database. So we'll do ck container.default.public cloud, come on, public cloud database, and we'll do .add operation. So I'll explain this line real quick. And the operation we want to add is the operation, right? We created the operation up here. It's a modify records operation. We're batch saving, and then we know how to handle the completion block, right? Where they're going to get back saved records, deleted records, or an error. We handle all that, and then we're going to print our saved records when we delete it. Now, what this line is basically telling it to run. And it's very similar to the URL session. You know how at the end of a URL session, when you make a network call, you have to call like tasks.resume, and that's what actually fires off your network call. I bet I know I have, you forgot to add that task.resume, and then you wonder why your network call is not working. Exact same thing here. This is basically task.resume. You have to have this line to fire off the operation. Okay, one quick run through before we test, right? Okay, so our create profile is a little bit, I'm gonna minimize here so we can see a lot more of it. So the first thing we do in create profile, we check, is our form valid? Great, we have all the information. We have all the information? Okay, cool. Create a CK record from all that information. Now that we have our profile record, we need our user record so we can connect the two. Well, to get our user record, we first got to get our user record ID from the container. You notice that's the difference. That's our overall container. And now we're going into the specific public database to get the record. So now that we have our record ID, let's get our user record. Again, two-step process to get the user record. Now that we have the user record, we have a property called user profile, which again, we set up in our schema. And we want to create a reference that points to the profile record ID. Again, this is how we create our user record to our profile. And if our user record gets deleted, we're also going to delete the profile so there's no confusion. Cool, our user record is ready to go, ready to be saved, and so is our profile record. So let's batch save those. To batch save those, we create a CK operation called CK modify records operation. We pass in an array of records to save. So the array we passed in has our user record and our profile record. That's all set up. Now we need to create our completion block to handle what happens afterwards. In our completion block, if it was successful, we're going to get saved records back to confirm, or deleted records. We're not messing with that, or an error. So here I am making sure I have saved records and making sure we don't have an error. If we do, we're going to print out what happened. And then if I have records, we're going to print saved records just to show that it happened. And then this last line, add operation, makes the whole thing happen. Okay, so let's run this and test it. Okay, here we are. Something I ran into when I was kind of rehearsing this specific video. You may see a pop-up that says you need to log in your settings. I don't know, something weird happens with the simulator that once you've logged in once in iCloud, like we did a couple videos ago, I don't know, like every day or so it'll log you out and you gotta like log back in. So you may see the app do weird stuff. Just make sure you're logged into iCloud. If you're logged into iCloud, everything should work fine. If you're not logged in, you may see some weird errors. Again, not sure what's going on there, but profile. Now let's add our image here. Cool, again, the old dub logo, hit choose, first name. Sean, Allen, company name, YouTube. Okay, I'm not going to put a bio. Let's double check. Create profile. Okay, invalid profile. Cool. I always want to make sure that is working. This is my cool bio. Don't be jealous. Okay, so I have my profile image, my name, my company, and my bio. Everything should be good. When I hit create profile, fingers crossed, things never work the first time, right? We should see a printout of our saved records in our console down here. So create profile. Okay, see, this is what I think you'll run into. Failed to modify some records. So I think this is what you'll see when you're not logged in. So I'm gonna pull up my simulator again. Well, let's stop running it. Pull it up. Yeah, and you can see when I stop running and pulled it up, I have the little 1 above my settings. Usually that's an indicator that I'm not logged in. So I'll go here, and again, I will cut away while I'll relog in. But if you run into the same issue, come here and log in, and then rerun the project. You should be fine, hopefully. All right, development's fun. So it turns out I was signed in. However, I have run into that issue before. So if you see something not working, that point I just made is still valid. Sometimes you need to relog in. However, that wasn't the issue we were having. So if you went ahead and logged in and tried to run it again, right, well, I'll do that with you here. You should still see the error because we messed something up, and I'll go back and explain it. So again, profile, create an image. We'll do the dub-dub-grub, choose, first name, Sean, last name, Alan, company name, YouTube, cool, and then I'll do something, this is different, just to make sure, we don't see the old profile, just in case something weird happens. But when I hit create profile, failed to modify some records still. So the bug here, and this is what I get. I rehearse these videos, believe it or not, because I know I mess up sometimes. But I deviated one line from my beta, and that was this delete self action. As I was explaining it, I was like, you know what? We can have it as delete self and not none, because in my beta, I had it as none. Well, I think it has something to do with the record we're attaching it to being the actual default user record ID and not some record we created ourselves. Because if we pull up our CloudKit dashboard, again, go to public database, query your DDG profiles, hit query record. Well, now you see profiles on here. Spoiler alert, this was supposed to be the climactic finish to the video. But so our profiles are getting created, and you notice we can create multiples, which will be fixed. But we still got that error, failed to modify some records. So you can see this is the one I just created. This is different. But this is a good opportunity to show you how you can, if things go wrong, here's how you can delete records. Just click on the record name over here on the right, just delete it. No big deal. Delete that record. And this was the previous user profile, delete that record. So the user profiles were getting created. You may have seen them up in CloudKit. However, the error happened with our user record and creating that reference. So back to Xcode, we already changed this to none and minimize that and go ahead and run it. Again, that's what I get. That's literally the only piece of code I deviated from my rehearsal. And of course, that's what breaks it. Okay, from now on, we're sticking to the rehearsals no matter what. Okay, profile, we'll do the dub-dub-grub image, choose, and then first name, Sean, Alan, company name, we'll do Aluna. Again, I'm gonna do a little bit different just to make sure, we don't see an old profile or anything like that. So now when I hit create profile, we should see our records print out. There we go. So if I go back into our console, here's what I was expecting the first time. We see our user record, see our profile get created here, right? First name, last name, avatar, cool. So that is being created. And then of course, stop running that, back to CloudKit. We will query again for DDG profiles. We deleted the old two, but now we should have this one, again, that shows me working out of Luna, a little bit different. And you can see our avatar now is 45 kilobytes. Much different from that 4.7 megabytes that Jason had. Again, we switched from PNGs to JPEGs, simple little bug I had there, and then we compressed it, to 25%. So there you go. Now we have a profile up in our CloudKit database. In the next video, we're going to retrieve this profile and populate our profile view.